Well, I don't know about you, but I am just so sick and tired of getting my leg peed on and being told that it's raining. How are you? Good afternoon, Washington, D.C. I'm Pete Mundo, filling in for Vince Coglianese on WMAL. It is great to be here. I host mornings in Kansas City, and we'll be with you for the next 3 hours. So, we get this jobs report this morning, and I'm sure by now you've seen some of the details around it. If you haven't seen the details, well, the numbers came in below expectations. 187,000 jobs in July. The numbers were expected to be at about, 200,000. So that's what they expected for this jobs report. It wasn't terrible. I'm not going to sit here and tell you the sky is falling, the economy is collapsing, anything like that. I'm not going to do that because that's not true. But what I will do is sit here and just be honest and say, you know what? These aren't great numbers. They're not. They're not great numbers. I know unemployment rate is low. That's outstanding. Why is the unemployment rate low in part? The unemployment rate is low in part because a lot of people are considered out of the labor force. You got to dig into the numbers a little bit, and some people are willing to do that today, but a lot are not. And one of the folks who is obviously not willing to dig into the numbers is our esteemed Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. I find it interesting, by the way, that it's Kamala Harris who is delivering remarks this afternoon on Bidenomics, not the President of the United States. I saw he was leaving Rehoboth and heading back to Wilmington today. So she's in town. She's in Southeast Washington, D.C. today, and she gives some comments on Bidenomics and how great the economy is, despite the fact that we have this jobs report that shows, well, the numbers are below expectations. Yes, unemployment is low, but the labor participation rate is not budging. We need to get more people back into the labor force. That's what we have to do more than anything else. You want to get rid of inflation? You get more people back to work. You get the hourly earnings under control. That's a big spike in why inflation's happened over the last couple of years. And then you'll see things calm down a little bit. But Kamala Harris making the pitch that everything is great is just not living in the reality of Main Street. It might be somewhat reality for Wall Street. Wall Street's had a great 6-7 months, led in large part by the big tech boom. But in terms of what you're seeing on Main Street, it's just not there. So let's go to cut one. Kamala Harris this afternoon here in D.C.
And as today's jobs numbers make clear, Bidenomics is working.
That's what more do you need to know? I still can't get over the fact that they're naming this economy Bidenomics. The economy that's overseen 40-year highs on inflation, they attach the guy's name to. Who thought of this? Did the Bud Light executives think of this name? Because I don't know why you would attach your own name to this economy. I just can't understand it. I can't wrap my head around it. But here we are. So Kamala Harris telling you it's working. Based on what? Well, she said it's working, so therefore it must be working, right? You have to believe that. You'd be crazy not to. I mean, these people wouldn't lie to you, would they? They'll shoot you straight. You know that. So, cut 3, Kamala Harris also continuing the speech today.
All that, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, that is called Bidenomics. That is called Bidenomics, and we are very proud of Bidenomics.
Yep. This is not an episode of Veep. This is real life today in D.C. Kamala Harris, after this jobs report, bragging about it. Now, let's look at the actual numbers where the jobs were added this past month. July's numbers. Healthcare and social assistance added 87,000 of the 187,000 jobs. That's a huge percentage, right? After that, construction, 19,000, financial activities, 19,000, wholesale trade, right around 18,000, leisure hospitality, that's been growing quickly, but slowed down tremendously to about 17,000 last month. And then, before anything else, you got the government adding 15,000 jobs. Gosh, isn't that sweet? Just what we need, right on the heels of Fitch lowering the U.S. credit rating, basically telling the federal government to stop spending like a bunch of drunken sailors. Apologize to you if you're a drunken sailor. The government telling, or I should say Fitch telling the government to stop spending like crazy people. Well, we got another 15,000 government jobs. We'll get there eventually, right? Got to fill those 87,000 IRS agent roles at some point. Yeesh. And then, where were the job losses? This is interesting. Manufacturing lost 2,000 jobs in July. It's not a huge number, but you got manufacturing, professional and business services, transportation and warehousing, and information all losing jobs last month. It's notable. It's notable considering we've been told for the last 18 months that here's a guy who's added 13 million jobs, right? That's what we've been told. That's been the pitch. 13 million jobs. Of course, a lot of those are just jobs replaced by COVID, pre-COVID job replacements. Those aren't job creations by any stretch of the imagination. I've got a 4-year-old, and she could do that math. She understands that math. You don't get to take away 10 million jobs and then bring them back and act like you created 10 million jobs. Not how it works. But, of course, that's what we've been convinced of, or tried to be convinced of, over the better part of 12 to 18 months. So here we are. This report comes out this morning. The vice president is trying to brag about it. But my favorite clip from today has nothing to do with what Kamala Harris actually said about Bidenomics. It was the quintessential, most beautiful Kamala Harris clip. It will go on the Mount Rushmore of Kamala Harris moments. And by the way, that's stiff competition. Cut 4.
Yeah, go ahead and clap. I don't want to step on the applause.
Oh, my. Go ahead and clap. Slow clap. I don't want to give you nightmares, but I had to do it. Because here's the thing, and this is just my fun general rule when I'm doing my show in Kansas City. If I stumble upon a clip that is so cringeworthy, I'm going to have nightmares about it. Just as a good friend and a liaison for the radio station, and in this case, filling in for Vince, I've got to share it with you. It's my duty to share it with you. So when you wake up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. in a hot sweat because of cut 4, one more time.
Yeah, go ahead and clap. I don't want to step on the applause.
Oh, brother. Oh, brother. Here we are. There you go. The esteemed vice president today, right here in town, bragging about Bidenomics, begging you to clap, by the way, and not wanting to step on the applause. Goodness gracious. Tell me you've never gotten an organic round of applause without telling me you've never gotten an organic round of applause. That's it right there. I mean, that's the Veep in a nutshell. The least popular vice president in modern American history based on the polling. I mean, that's it. That's the quintessential Kamala Harris clip for you right there. And it's just beautiful because even when they're trying to tell you how great everything is, even the people in the audience aren't buying it. They got to beg the people in the audience to clap for them. That's where we're at. And I was thinking about this as well as I'm watching the speech today and seeing the vice president give these comments this afternoon in Southeast Washington, D.C. And I'm thinking to myself, I know Joe's on vacation, and I think I saw he spent 35% of his time in office on vacation. I get it. But, like vacation for the president, the jobs report's coming out today, right? I mean, everyone knows the Fed sets these, a year in advance? You can get the schedule back in January when the jobs report's coming out. I know Joe needs a breather. I know there's a lot going on. I know he's, got to get on a couple more phone calls with Hunter and his business associates, and that takes a lot out of him. But you would think if this jobs report was so great, you would think that the guy that's running for re-election may want to be the one to show up and brag about it. That might be a stretch. That might be it. But you would think that if this was such great news, and if we were supposed to sit here on Main Street and do cartwheels over this, You would think that he would want to take the credit. I mean, the guy's up for re-election here in 15 months. Trust me, I love the beach as much as anybody else. I've spent time down in South Bethany Beach once in my life. Beautiful part of the country. But I'm pretty sure if I'm the president and I've got this jobs report that comes out, and by the way, the polling shows I'm incredibly weak on the economy, I might take a day, go back to the office, and brag to the American people about it. By the way, it's not like you or I doing that. It's not like one of us say, I got to go into the office today. It's like, they'll figure out a way to get you there, Joe. And they'll even put on the suit for you, too. It's not that big of a lift. So I find that fascinating. And a part of me wonders if that's because they're trying to lay the foundation for, if not Joe, then we really are stuck with Kamala, which I don't think they should even bother with. I think you go right over to Gavin Newsom if that happens. But if they are thinking, hey, let's see how Kamala does in a situation like this, basically representing this White House, talking about this jobs report, that's the only thing I can think of. And by the way, she failed colossally. I mean, if you're grading that on a scale of A to F, what is it, a D? If I'm feeling generous, C minus? There was nothing about that was overly compelling. There's nothing about what I played for you that was all that presidential. 888-630-WMAL, 888-630-9625. Pete Mundo out of Kansas City in for Vince Coglianese on WMAL. It's great to be here with you on a Friday afternoon, taking you into the weekend. Let's go to the phones. Rob is in Montgomery County. Rob, what's happening? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, Rob. What's happening?
Well, I'm listening to all this. Something. It's kind of like reminds me of Green Acres.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Or
That's a
maybe
great
they'll
way.
start feeding
Yes.
us Soylent Green.
Yes. That's so well done there, Rob. Nice job. Nice job by you.
Anyway, we're talking about the downgrade, speaking of jobs and
yes.
Fitch reducing our bond rating, on the planet. And then you have, the Chinese and I think India buying up during the last several years, buying up all the gold. And one of the reports came out, or someone reported that they want to get away from the U.S. dollar. These are real bad signs that people better be looking at.
You're absolutely right.
Just, this is not good.
Mm-hmm. Rob, thank you so much. Outstanding analogy, by the way. Appreciate the call. That's an A for effort. Just gave Kamala a generous C minus. I'm giving Rob an A on that analogy. That's absolutely outstanding. Jeff is in Hagerstown. What's up, Jeff? How are you? Good afternoon.
Hey, Pete. Hey, Pete. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Jeff. What's on your mind?
Okay. So the fourth letter in the alphabet is a D. Kamala's got four of them. She's dense, dumb, dolt, and just dunce. I mean, she okay, this whole thing, it's working. It's the Bidenomics, it's working great for them. It's working great for the left. They want to sink this country into socialism and just bottom out the economy and just ruin it all, and it's working great for them, not so much for the American people.
Yeah. Hey, I will say, though, Jeff, you forgot one of the Ds I was looking for there. You were going through the Ds. The Ds were good. I thought you might have broken out disaster. That was the D I was waiting for there, Jeff.
Well, there's another one that rides.
Don't do it. Don't do it, Jeff. Come on. I'm just here to fill in. I'm just trying to keep the FCC license. Come on, Jeff.
Thanks for taking my call, Pete.
All right. Thank you.
Weekend.
You as well, Jeff. Have a good weekend. Jeez. You guys, come on. Don't get me in trouble here. I'm just trying to have a good time for 3 hours, fill in for Vince, and keep the station afloat. I love the MAL guys. I'm not looking to get this place in trouble. Please don't do that to me. But thanks for biting your tongue there, Jeff. That was very much appreciated. Oh, my goodness gracious. I mean, I'm glad we can have a laugh at this, because if not, we're all going to end up crying. But it's one of these things that when you look at where this economy is right now, I'm in Kansas City. I do mornings at KCMO, as I've noted. You guys are in D.C., and I know there's a lot of like-minded similarities between many of us. But if you were to come out here, there are parts of the economy that certainly seem better than others. But there's also a lot of people, just a lot of regular working folks that, realize and understand that in the last 2 years, the cost for the average American family, of which there are many in the Kansas City area, the cost to live the same life as 2 years ago has gone up $10,000. That's real money. That's real money impacting real people. And that's why when I see this White House going out and giving speeches telling you how great the economy is after today's jobs report, it's like that's not what the polls are showing. They're just not showing that. On Main Street, they're not showing that. And it's like if you're trying to, court your future spouse or someone who you think is going to be your future spouse, and you keep telling that person how you are just the greatest ever. Oh, no one's better than you. And you're like, yeah, no, you're not that great. And by the way, when you do that, that's a bigger turnoff, because then it's like just insulting the person you're trying to court. And that's what we're living through right now. Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese on WMAL, 888-630-9625. We'll get to more with you coming up. It's 3:20. Pete Mundo out of Kansas City, KCMO Talk Radio, filling in for Vince Coglianese on a Friday afternoon. Been talking about this Joe Biden, this Bidenomics jobs report, which is not all Kamala Harris is trying to hype it up to be. Carol's in Bowie. Carol, I got a minute. It is yours. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Two things. First of all, on the jobs report, sort of at the very end, they say, in the last 2 months, they lowered the numbers that they had given us, which means it wasn't as good the last 2 months as they said. And second of all, I wonder how many of these jobs are second jobs because people can't make it on one job anymore.
That is, Carol, thank you. That is a great point. Babylon Bee had this headline today. White House says Bidenomics so successful, the average American has twice as many jobs as they had 2 years ago. Oh, that's great. All right, coming up, Roger Marshall, U.S. Senator out of Kansas, will react to this jobs report and the latest on the Trump indictments with Roger Marshall, Kansas U.S. Senator, coming up next. I'm Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese on WMAL. I'm telling you, when you've got your vice president giving this speech today here in Washington, D.C., trying to tell you how great the economy is when Main Street knows it's not the case, it's just insulting. I'm Pete Mundo out of Kansas City, filling in for Vince Coglianese on WMAL. It is great to be here on a Friday afternoon. Want to welcome on a guy that we know very well in our neck of the woods, but you do too. You see him on Fox News, you see him on Fox Business, and that is Kansas U.S. Senator Roger Marshall joining me here on WMAL. Senator, it is great to have you on. Normally I would say good morning, but I will say good afternoon. Normally your stomping grounds here in Washington, D.C. How are you?
Hey, Pete, I'm doing great. Next time I talk to you, I want to be at the Chiefs summer camp and see how the Chiefs are doing, and I'm a little bit concerned. I'm not sure where the Washington Commanders have their summer camp, but maybe we'll do a show from there someday.
Well, I just, I really wanted to bring you on just to, have you talk about what it's like to have a real football team. But I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Senator, let's get into this jobs report. The vice president today has this speech in D.C. bragging about how great it is. The numbers come in below expectations. You've seen the numbers. What's your reaction?
Well, the unemployment numbers, I'm happy for that. I want everyone to have a good job. My biggest concern about this low inflation number is it's going to make the Feds be a little bit hesitant about slowing down their interest rate increases. But to your big point, I talk to my parents, I talk to my kids. They feel like groceries are up 25-30%. Certainly their energy, their utility bills are up over 30%. I don't have to tell anybody listening that the price of gasoline is about $1.50 a gallon more than it was 2 years ago as well. The inflation is the story of the economy. Biden inflation, going back to these inflation numbers, I would encourage people to follow up from the unemployment standpoint is participation rates. and we still are about 0.7% below on the participation rate numbers. 7 million healthy American men between the ages of 25 and 45 not working right now.
Well, that is such a good point, and it is a crisis, the amount of, able-bodied individuals, but certainly men who are not in the labor force. Do you feel like this administration has any plan, and in your time in the Senate, has there been any plan proposed to reverse that trend?
Right. What we've tried to speak out on, Pete, is ending the COVID emergency, which we finally got done. The president was using, his schizophrenic policies to drive his political agenda. And in this particular case, he was paying people's tuition. He was paying their utility bills, paying their rent, giving them free health care. A family of four can make $80,000, $90,000 a year to not work. So our emphasis is to stop all this unnecessary spending. Look, there are people that need help. We want to help them. But there's certainly a large number of people that are living off the government that could work. And by the way, I think a job's a great thing. I think having a job would solve some of the many mental health issues we have. Everybody has this innate quality in them that they want to be a contributor to society. And I think the person that's the hedge trimmer is every bit as important as the person that runs a hedge fund.
Senator Roger Marshall out of Kansas is joining us on WMAL. Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese. When you, Senator, you obviously go back and forth between your home state and Washington, D.C. We're talking right now in Washington, D.C. How do you explain to folks when you're inside the Beltway what it's like when you're going back home and you're dealing with folks in your home state and you're trying to connect with those people and tell folks in D.C., hey, it's not as rosy as it might appear to be in certain parts of the D.C. metro?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just to point out what folks are concerned about back home are not necessarily what the mainstream national media wants to talk about in D.C. And I'll give you an example. I work out in the Senate gym every afternoon, about 4 to 5 o'clock, and there's a nice little group of us. And this, by the way, this gym is worse than any YMCA I've ever worked out in. But on one TV, we'll have Fox News or Fox Business. On the other one, we're going to have a CNN or MSNBC. And for the first 30 minutes on the MSNBC station, all they talk about is what? The Trump indictment. On the other station, all they talk about is Hunter Biden and the president's issues as well. And so that and every time I get stopped, I'm not kidding you, the last 3 days in D.C. before our break, every mainstream media was asking me about the indictments. But no one back home is asking me about the indictments. They're asking me, what are you going to do about this political agenda that the president has that's driving up the price of gasoline, groceries. And, the cost of a mortgage has doubled. A person looking for a new home right now, the cost of their mortgage payment is going to be double of what it was 2 years. Again, Biden says he wants to do housing projects, but he's driving up the prices of building homes. So it's just a crazy, as I call it, a schizophrenic agenda.
And when you look down the road, I know that, you're sitting there in the Senate, you're in the minority, of course, as a Republican, but you're hopeful to what 2024 brings when it comes to the White House and then flipping the Senate back. Is it going back? Is it as simple as going back to the policies of President Trump to really get this economy humming again and get out of this malaise that it feels like we're in right now?
Yeah. So, Pete, I tell everybody that we don't need a rocket science plan. There's not some new saving plan out there for us. Let's go back to the basics and fundamentals. And really in America, I think it starts with energy. Getting people back to work, but starting with energy in so many ways that what manufacturing process, who doesn't depend upon energy for their jobs in some way, shape, or form, clean, affordable, reliable energy. Let's start with that. That's just a very simple policy. Next would be rolling back regulations. Again, this is not rocket science. My small businesses are telling me they're just being crowded out now with over-regulations as well. So we just need a basic, simple plan. Let's go back to fundamentals. Blocking and tackling is what we should be focused on.
Dr. Roger Marshall, U.S. Senator out of Kansas, is joining me, Pete Mundo, in for Vince Coglianese on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We're making sense of the news. Well, I know you mentioned there's not a lot of chatter back home about the Trump indictment, but obviously it still is a major topic after what has happened this week. So, as you talk to folks and, you're back home and bumping into people, what are you telling them when it comes to this latest indictment? It's hard to keep track of all the indictments, Senator Marshall, but what do we make of it?
Right. Well, Pete, number one, this fires up the Trump base. They're going to get out and vote to support him. Absolutely. Every time he gets indicted, I see the fever pitch going up. I want to focus just a second on this latest indictment, this January 6th indictment, I'm going to call it. Listen, Donald Trump is the greatest counterpuncher I've ever seen in political history. And this is putting a sword in his hand. If they go through with this is going to allow him to call up some of those state election boards, call up, Nancy Pelosi and say, why didn't you do what I asked you to do, Nancy Pelosi? I asked for 10,000 National Guard units here to say, why wouldn't you do that? And then again, circling back to the election fraud that he's claimed, these states that maybe broke their own state laws or their own constitution, getting those people in front of us to ask those questions that I've been asking since January 6th of 2020. So again, I think that this puts a sword in Donald Trump's hand, and he is a great, great counterpuncher.
And when you look at this, I mean, politically, he's up obviously anywhere from 30 to 40 points in a lot of polls. This only strengthens him with his base. You're right about that. You know that in your home state. I mean, I see it every day in what I do. Why do you think that is? Why is it that this hardens that base for him in a way that no other politician in our lifetimes have ever had?
Right. I think that you cannot fool the American people. They all realize, everybody, every one of your listeners know that this Biden administration has politicized his Justice Department and the FBI as well. So that this is unequal application of the law. You know, Pete, my dad was the chief of police in my hometown for 25 years, and he always talked about equal application of the law. Instead, we have the current person in the White House using the Justice Department as his weapon to destroy Donald Trump politically. So we all see through that, whether you like Trump or don't like him. We think that this isn't fair. Americans like fairness. And this is not equal application of the law.
And, in terms of as it applies to 2024 and beyond, obviously you're not on the ballot next time around, but there's a belief that maybe the Democrats want this. They think it's good to have him at the top of the ticket. They think it's good to make the conversation about Trump legal woes and not, let's say, a stagnant economy. Do you think there's a little 3D chess on their end going on here, or is that giving them too much credit?
Oh, I think that there's so much chaos, Pete, and political science, that's an oxymoron to think that politics is a science at all. And you're much more astute at this than I am. I tell people Donald Trump may be the only person that Joe Biden can beat, and vice versa as well. Joe Biden may be the only person that Trump can beat. And which one, I don't know. That's why we play the game, right? We have to play the game. I don't know what America's going to do. I have to trust her, and that they'll figure this out. And again, I think that Americans, when push comes to shove, they're going to vote their pocketbook this election. They've, you can't make up the numbers that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have right now. Their unfavorables are just through the bottom of the basement even. So we'll see what America does. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a fascinating 15 months to see how it plays out, Senator Marshall. And last thing, to tie it back to the economy, we know this week that, Fitch lowered the credit rating for the country, which ties into, and they basically said in their statement, the amount of government spending is completely out of control and not sustainable. When Fitch lowers the credit rating, Senator, do your colleagues on the other side, do they put 2 and 2 together and get 4 and say, hey, we've got to curtail this spending, or are they just not connecting the dots on this?
Yeah, I don't think that they'll blink, Pete. But to your point and to the other folks' point is what's really threw gasoline on the fire was this massive borrowing of maybe $6 trillion when Joe Biden took over the White House. When you borrow that type of money, the Feds start printing money as well, and that's what inflation's about. So they understand that if the government doesn't start slowing down its spending, it's unsustainable. And whether you think we need a strong military, strong schools, good roads and bridges, if we're spending $750 billion a year on interest, this business model is unsustainable. So, my friends across the aisle do like to spend money. They don't really stop and think what it's going to cost. And I got to point the fingers at ourselves. We just spent $900 billion on the military this year. We went from, in my 6 years, from 600 to 700 to 800 to now $900 billion this year on the military. And you wait, they're going to come back and ask for another $100 billion between Ukraine and needing more weapons and who knows what else as well. We need to take a look in the mirror and see how we're spending this money. Are we efficiently, effectively, economically spending America's money?
Senator Roger Marshall. This audience will see him on Fox News and Fox Business, our friend out of the state of Kansas. Senator, thank you for the time. We really
Pete.
appreciate it.
Yeah, Pete, great to talk to you, and look forward to seeing you soon, I hope.
Absolutely. That is Roger Marshall, Kansas U.S. Senator, joining me here on WMAL. It is great to be here in for Vince Coglianese. So you heard a lot there from Senator Marshall, and he's absolutely right, by the way, on the economic front and also the indictment front. But I've got to hand it to President Trump. I mean, however you feel about him, can we all agree that the guy has a sense of humor? He just got indicted for a third time. And as we've got here in Cut 10, listen to President Trump talk about this as he's getting out of court in D.C. in the last 24 hours. Here's what he had to say.
Thank you very much. This is a very sad day for America. And it was also very sad driving through Washington, D.C. and seeing the filth and the decay and all of the broken buildings and walls and the graffiti. This is not the place that I left. It's a very sad thing to see it. When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America.
Now, that's President Trump talking about this latest indictment. And in between talking about what a sham it is, and by the way, no matter how you feel about the guy, whether he's your candidate in 24 or not, the fact that you would say Donald Trump should be indicted for thinking something or saying something that he truly believes is a scary proposition. I mean, if you're a First Amendment person, and I consider myself a First Amendment absolutist, whether I agree with you or not, like, you're allowed to say stuff in this country. Whether you're Donald Trump, whether you're Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, you, me, we're allowed to, say stuff. And we're allowed to believe things and say things in America, even if they aren't based right now in hard, stone-cold facts. You don't have to agree with them, but you can at least and should at least agree with his right to believe it, right, and say it. And those are two different things. I'm not saying that you got to be all, in Trump's back pocket on his beliefs on the 2020 election. I'm not. But what I am is somebody who is going to give him every right as an American to say it and not have to worry about a special counsel tacking on another indictment. But anyway, he makes his point clear, and then he also takes a dig at D.C. in the process, basically says this place is a dump, and this is not the place I left 3.5 years ago. And, you're there, you're seeing it every day, and, we can weave you in as well on that conversation at 888-630-WMAL, 888-630-9625. You're living it there. But when the president said that in the last 24 hours, I thought to myself, geez, I'm going to be talking to my friends in Washington, D.C. on Friday afternoon. They're seeing it every day. I can tell you we're seeing it in Kansas City as well. Almost, and you might not believe that, but every major American city, it seems like. Certainly seen it in Kansas City, seen it in St. Louis on the other side of our state. We have seen two major American cities in a red state, but these two cities went from blue to deep blue and lost their minds over the last 3.5 years. And you are seeing people leave. You are seeing the police departments dwindle. Defunding the police is happening, not because they're actually taking money away, but no one wants the job. Homicides are at a record high, trending towards a record high in our city. And there's many major American cities that are seeing that same trend. And just ask yourself, what do they all have in common? 888-630-WMAL. Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese. You really can't make sense of this recent Donald Trump indictment. You just can't do it. Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese. I'm out of Kansas City, KCMO Talk Radio. Great to be with you on a Friday afternoon. So President Trump, if you missed it here in the last few hours, he did put on his Truth Social page, called on the Supreme Court to get involved earlier today after being arraigned, of course, in federal court over the 4 new charges tied to January 6th. He says it is election interference and the Supreme Court must intercede, he writes here. Now, his point and he goes on the note that the various legal matters require massive amounts of time and money to adjudicate. He noted the resources going towards his legal representation and litigation would have gone to ads and rallies. Now, this comes in the wake of reports this week, essentially the president more or less confirming, Donald Trump confirming, that he has spent tens of millions of dollars raised by his PACs on these legal issues. And that's why I've often thought that no matter what comes out of this, Democrats are winning here because it's a zero-sum game in political spending. It's a zero-sum game in the sense that every dollar that Donald Trump spends on legal issues is money that could have been spent on, getting out the vote, legal ballot harvesting where you can do it, right? Voter registration events, rallies, ads, whatever it might be, all of those things that can't be done when you're spending tens of millions of dollars in legal expenses. And his super PAC, Save America, recently reported spending $21 million in legal expenses. So that's where they got to be licking their chops on this. Man, oh man, oh man. I don't know what the Supreme Court can do about that front, but it's certainly something that, as a voter, has to make you think about what the best way forward is. Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese as we approach the top of the hour. It's great to be here with you on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. How old is too old? And new polling from Iowa next hour.